The mahogany desk drawer slammed shut with such force that the framed wedding photo toppled over. I barely caught it before it hit the floor. Daniel's face stared back at me from behind the glass, his smile now seeming more practiced than genuine. The folder in my other hand felt impossibly heavy for something containing just a few sheets of paper. I'm Rebecca Mitchell, Becca to my friends, and until 10 minutes ago, I thought I understood my place in the Wilson family. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Becca, are you home? Daniel's voice echoed from the foyer, the familiar sound of his briefcase hitting the entryway table following shortly after. I froze, still clutching both the photograph and the folder. My heart hammered against my ribs as I heard his footsteps approaching our home office. "In here," I called, my voice steadier than I expected. I slid the folder under a stack of photography magazines just as he appeared in the doorway. "Hey, what are you doing in my office?" His tone was light, but his eyes darted to the open drawer of his desk. "Just looking for stamps," I lied, setting the wedding photo back in its place. "How was the quarterly family lunch?" "Same as always." Mom monopolizing the conversation, Dad checking email under the table, Tom and Jen arguing about who's hosting Thanksgiving. Daniel loosened his tie, the Wilson Family Properties logo catching the afternoon light. "You should have come. Your mother made it clear this was just for blood Wilsons. Something about discussing Q3 financials." "Right," he nodded, but something flickered across his face. Guilt? Annoyance? After 8 years of marriage, I should have been able to read my husband better. But the contents of that folder had me questioning everything I thought I knew. It started with a water stain, a seemingly innocent brown circle on our ceiling that led me into the attic on a rainy Tuesday afternoon while Daniel was at work. I'd gone up to place a bucket under the leak, armed with my phone's flashlight and determination to document the damage for our insurance claim. That's when I spotted the locked chest pushed against the far wall, partially hidden beneath an old comforter. I recognized it immediately. Richard Wilson, my father-in-law, had carried it into our home 3 years earlier, instructing Daniel to keep it safe with a gravity that seemed excessive for family memorabilia. I'd asked about it once over dinner, and Eleanor, my mother-in-law, had dismissed my question with her practiced smile and a swift change of subject. The chest hadn't crossed my mind since then. Out of sight, out of mind. A perfect metaphor for how the Wilson family seemed to treat me at their gatherings. Present but peripheral, tolerated but not embraced. I should have respected their privacy, should have placed the bucket and gone back downstairs to my editing work. The latest wedding photo shoot wasn't going to process itself, but something about that chest pulled at me, the same way a loose thread on a sweater begs to be pulled despite knowing it might unravel everything. The lock was surprisingly simple to pick, a skill I'd learned for a photography installation project years ago, before I met Daniel, before I became a Wilson by marriage if not by acceptance. Inside the chest, I expected family photo albums, perhaps old letters or heirlooms. What I found instead was a series of leather-bound notebooks, each embossed with gold lettering. Wilson Family Annual Assessment. The most recent volume was dated just last year. I lifted it carefully, the leather cool against my fingers. Still crouched in the attic with rain pattering above me, I opened it to a random page and began to read. Jennifer's husband, Kevin Porter, rating 7. 8-10. Up 0, 3 from previous year. Strengths. Financial contribution to family business has increased by 15%. Successfully managed riverfront development. Maintains appropriate public image. Weaknesses. Still exhibits independent thinking regarding investment strategies. Occasionally challenges Richard's authority in board meetings. Recommendation. Continue quarterly private meetings with Richard to align priorities. My hands trembled as I flipped to another section, Thomas's wife, Olivia Wilson. Rating 6. 210, down 0. 5 from previous year. Strengths. Children performing excellently in school. Maintains impeccable home and appearance at all functions. Weaknesses. Failed to secure Thompson account despite. Family connections. Displayed emotional reaction when criticized at summer retreat. Recommendation. Eleanor to increase mentoring sessions. Consider limiting involvement in client-facing roles. With growing dread, I searched for my own name, finding it near the end of the volume. Daniel's wife, Rebecca Mitchell Wilson. Rating 4. 310, down 1-2 from previous year. Strengths. Continues to maintain acceptable public presence. Photography business no longer takes excessive time away from family obligations. Weaknesses. Still resists full integration into family culture. Questions traditions rather than embracing them. Has not yet produced children despite being married for 7 years. Shows concerning independent streak. Has formed friendship with Megan Chen, who has leftist political leanings. Recommendation. Daniel to increase influence over business decisions and social connections. Eleanor to schedule additional private lunches to reinforce expectations. Possible replacement assessment to begin if no improvement by next retreat. Possible replacement assessment. The words burned into my vision like I'd stared at the sun. I snapped the book shut, my breath coming in quick, shallow bursts. The Wilsons weren't just judging me. They were evaluating me like a problematic investment, complete with metrics and contingency plans. The revelation sent me spiraling back through countless interactions. Eleanor's pointed questions about when we would finally start a family. Richard's offers to help manage my growing photography business. The way family vacations always seemed to include eligible single women who were old family friends. I spent hours in that attic, moving methodically through the notebooks, tracing the Wilson family's system back nearly 30 years. Previous spouses who'd mysteriously left the family had abysmal scores in their final assessments. Those who remained had steadily increasing numbers, correlating precisely with their conformity to Wilson expectations. It was clinical, methodical, horrifying. When I finally descended from the attic, folder of photocopied pages clutched against my chest, the afternoon had faded into evening. I moved through our home, the home that Daniel had insisted we buy, in this particular neighborhood, just 3 streets away from his parents, seeing it with new eyes. How many of our life decisions had been shaped by this secret scoring system? How many of my choices had been quietly manipulated to align with Wilson family expectations? That was 2 days ago. I'd hidden the folder in my photography equipment case, buying time to process, to plan. But this morning, some reckless impulse had driven me to move it to Daniel's desk. Perhaps some part of me wanted him to find it, to force the conversation I wasn't sure how to start. Now, standing in our office with Daniel's questioning gaze on me, that impulse seemed foolish. "You look pale," he said, moving closer. "Are you feeling okay?" I stepped back, creating distance. "Actually, I'm not sure I am." Another lie that felt like truth. "I might call Megan, see if she wants to grab coffee." A slight furrow appeared between his brows. "Megan Chen? Didn't you have lunch with her just last week?" The assessment echoed in my mind. Has formed friendship with Megan Chen, who has leftist political leanings. "She's helping me with a photo shoot," I said, already moving toward the door. "Client wants a more diverse approach." Daniel nodded, but I caught the slight tightening of his jaw, a tell I'd noticed years ago when we were dating. Back then, I'd found it endearing. This physical manifestation of him processing something he didn't immediately like. Now it sent a chill down my spine. "Don't be too late," he called as I grabbed my keys. "Mom's stopping by for dinner, remember?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Of course she was. Eleanor Wilson never simply stopped by. Her visits were strategic, purposeful, and now I understood exactly why she insisted on them. The drive to Blue Oak Cafe passed in a blur of autumn colors and racing thoughts. Megan was already waiting at our usual corner table, 2 steaming mugs in front of her. "You sounded weird on the phone," she said as I slid into the seat across from her. No preamble, no small talk. One of the reasons I treasured her friendship. "What's going on?" I glanced around the cafe, suddenly paranoid. Oak Ridge wasn't a small town, but the Wilson family's influence made it feel that way sometimes. Richard's real estate company had developed half the commercial properties downtown. Eleanor sat on numerous charity boards. They had eyes everywhere. "Becca?" Megan's voice pulled me back. "You're scaring me a little." "Did I ever tell you why Daniel's last girlfriend left him?" I asked, wrapping my cold fingers around the warm mug. Megan frowned. "Christine, I thought she got a job in Chicago." "That's what they told everyone, but there was no job. She just disappeared, deleted social media, changed her number. I found her once, about a year after we started dating. She was working at a gallery in Seattle." "Okay, and?" "She wouldn't talk to me. Actually, she looked terrified when I mentioned the Wilsons, said I should get out while I still could, then practically ran away from me." I took a sip of coffee, wincing at the bitterness. I thought she was just bitter about the breakup. Megan leaned forward. "And now?" I pulled out my phone, opening the photos I'd taken of the most damning pages. Now I think she was trying to warn me. As Megan read, her expression shifted, from confusion to disbelief to horror. "Holy shit, Becca. This is like some cult-level control tactics." "It gets worse." I swiped to another image. "They've been doing this for generations. There's a pattern. Anyone who scores below a 5 for 2 consecutive assessments either gets with the program or disappears from the family. Divorces, relocations, sudden career opportunities across the country." "And you scored." 4-3, I said quietly. Down from 5-5 the year before. Megan set the phone down carefully, as if it might bite her. "What are you going to do?" The question hung between us, heavy with implications. What could I do? I loved Daniel, or at least, I loved the man. I thought he was. We'd built a life together, intertwined our dreams, our futures. But had any of it been real? Was he an active participant in this system, or another victim of his family's manipulation? "I need to know if Daniel knows," I finally said. "If he's been reporting on me, evaluating me all these years, or if he's in the dark too." "And if he knows?" I stared out the window at the maple trees lining Main Street, their leaves burning red and gold in the afternoon sun. "Then I need to decide if our marriage is worth saving." Megan reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "Whatever you need, I'm here." "They know that too," I said, showing her the section about our friendship. "They've been watching us, monitoring who I spend time with." A shadow crossed her face. "That's beyond controlling, Becca. That's abuse." The word landed like a physical blow. Abuse. It didn't align with my image of the Wilsons. Always polite, always proper, always concerned with appearances. But control was abuse, wasn't it? The slow, systematic dismantling of my independence, disguised as family tradition and loving concern. "I need proof," I said suddenly. "The notebooks are damning, but they're circumstantial. I need to know how deep this goes, who's involved, what they're planning." "How are you going to get that?" A plan was already forming in my mind. The annual Wilson family retreat is next month at Lake Willowbrook. They always schedule these mysterious business sessions where spouses aren't allowed. Megan's eyes widened. "You're not thinking of—" "I'm a photographer, Meg. I have equipment that can capture images and audio from a distance. And I'm apparently scoring low enough that they don't see me as a threat. Just a problem to be managed. Or replaced, Megan said grimly, tapping the phone screen where those words glowed back at us. Or replaced, I agreed, which means I have less than a month to figure out exactly what I'm up against. The bell above the cafe door jingled, and I instinctively glanced up. Thomas Wilson, Daniel's older brother, stood in the entrance, scanning the room. When his gaze landed on our table, something flickered across his face before he composed himself into a friendly smile. Coincidence? Megan murmured as he approached. I forced myself to smile. About as coincidental as Eleanor's surprise dinner. Visits. Becca, what a pleasant surprise. Tom's voice carried the same smooth cadence all the Wilsons possessed, like verbal honey designed to make everything they said sound reasonable. And Megan, right? We met at Daniel's birthday last year. Good memory, Megan said, her tone neutral. Tom gestured to the empty chair at our table. Mind if I join you ladies for a moment? Before I could answer, he was already sitting down, flagging a server for coffee. Up close, the resemblance between him and Daniel was striking. Same strong jaw, same warm brown eyes that crinkled at the corners when they smiled. But where Daniel's expressions usually seemed genuine, I'd always sensed a calculation behind Tom's charm. So, what brings you downtown on a workday? He asked, directing the question at me. Just catching up with a friend, I replied, keeping my tone light. What about you? Aren't you usually buried in meetings this time of day? Had to meet with Harold about some paperwork for the lake property. Harold Bennett, the family lawyer. Actually, I'm glad I ran into you. Mom mentioned she's having dinner with you and Daniel tonight? I nodded, wondering if Eleanor had sent him to check on me. The thought, which would have seemed paranoid just days ago, now felt entirely plausible. Perfect. I was hoping to drop off the retreat itinerary, save me a trip to your house later. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket, sliding it across the table. We've made some changes this year. More activities for the spouses while we handle the boring business stuff. More activities to keep us occupied and separated, I translated silently. Thanks, I said, taking the envelope without opening it. I'll be sure to review it with Daniel. Tom's eyes lingered on my face a beat too long. Is everything okay, Becca? You seem tense. Just a demanding client, I lied smoothly. Deadline pressure. You know, you could always scale back. That business of yours. Daniel makes more than enough at Wilson Properties. Olivia found she was much happier once she let go of her career ambitions. Olivia Wilson, rating 6/10, who displayed emotional reaction when criticized and was now receiving mentoring from Eleanor. I'll keep that in mind, I said, fighting to keep the sarcasm from my voice. Tom checked his watch, a Rolex, identical to the one Richard had given Daniel on our 5th anniversary. I should get going. Family dinner tomorrow night at the house. Right? Dad's grilling those steaks you like. Another coincidental family gathering. How had I never noticed the pattern before? Wouldn't miss it, I said, the lie bitter on my tongue. After Tom left, Megan and I sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. That was the creepiest thing I've ever witnessed. He was totally checking up on you. I turned the retreat envelope over in my hands, feeling the weight of high-quality paper. Welcome to life as a Wilson spouse. Always watched, always evaluated. What's your next move? I thought of Eleanor coming to dinner tonight, of the family gathering tomorrow, of all the performances I would need to give while hiding what I now knew. I'm going to play along, I said, a sense of resolve hardening inside me. I'm going to be the perfect Wilson wife, attentive, agreeable, appropriately ambitious but never challenging. I'll convince them I'm back on track to raise my score. And meanwhile? Meanwhile, I gather evidence. I find out exactly how this system works, who's driving it, and what happens to the people who fail their assessments. I met Megan's concerned gaze, and I figure out if my husband is a victim or an accomplice. The weight of what lay ahead settled onto my shoulders. I would be living a double life, performing for a family that had been secretly judging me for years. But beneath the fear and betrayal, another emotion was taking root: determination. They've been evaluating me all this time without my knowledge. Or consent, I said, straightening my shoulders. Now it's my turn to evaluate them. Part 2. The Escalation. The kitchen smelled of rosemary and garlic as I carefully arranged Eleanor's favorite china on our dining table. Perfect spacing between each setting, water glasses at precisely 2 inches from the plate edge, napkins folded into the bishop's hat style she had suggested I learn last Christmas. As I worked, I could hear Daniel and his mother in the living room, their conversation a gentle murmur punctuated by Eleanor's distinctive laugh. "She's been so distracted lately," I caught Daniel saying, his voice lowered but not enough. "I'm worried about her." "It's natural to go through phases, dear," Eleanor replied, her tone dripping with practiced concern. "Rebecca is adjusting. We simply need to be patient." I set down the silver serving spoon with more force than necessary, the clang making me wince. Adjusting. As if my personhood was an inconvenient character flaw that needed smoothing, out like a wrinkle in one of Eleanor's linen tablecloths. "Dinner's ready," I called, injecting warmth into my voice that I didn't feel. "Hope everyone's hungry." They appeared in the dining room doorway, Eleanor resplendent in her cashmere sweater set, pearls gleaming at her throat. Daniel's hand rested, at the small of his mother's back, a gesture of closeness that had never bothered me before tonight. "Rebecca, darling, everything looks lovely." Eleanor surveyed the table with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to finding flaws. Finding none in the place settings, her gaze shifted to me. "Though you look tired. Are you sleeping well?" The question seemed innocent enough, but I recognized it now for what it was: a probe, testing for weaknesses, gathering data for her assessment. "Just busy with a new client project," I said, ushering them toward their seats. "But it's nothing. A good night's sleep won't fix." I was telling Daniel earlier that Olivia swears by this wonderful herbal supplement. Helps with anxiety, stress, all those little imbalances that can make us women so emotional. Olivia. Rating, 6. 210. Displayed emotional reaction when criticized. "I'll have to ask her about it," I smiled, serving the roasted potatoes. Eleanor preferred while ignoring the twisting sensation in my stomach. Dinner progressed like a carefully choreographed dance. Eleanor leading, Daniel following, me struggling to keep pace while pretending I didn't know the music had been chosen, specifically to trip me up. "So, Rebecca," Eleanor said as she delicately cut her chicken, "Daniel tells me your photography business is quite busy lately." Daniel nodded. "Becca's booked through December. That corporate client I introduced her to has been commissioning regular work." Eleanor's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "How wonderful. Though I do worry about you stretching yourself too thin, dear. Especially with the family retreat coming up, and the holidays after that. So many obligations." "I manage my schedule carefully," I replied, taking a sip of water to calm the irritation rising in my throat. "Of course you do," Eleanor patted my hand condescendingly. "But there's nothing wrong with prioritizing family over career. Some of the most fulfilled women I know have found their true calling as supporters of their husbands' ambitions. Like Olivia, whose mentoring sessions with Eleanor had increased after her rating dropped. Like Jennifer, who had gradually abandoned her interior design career after marrying Kevin, transitioning into the role of perfect Wilson wife with suspicious ease. Balance is important, I offered neutrally. Speaking of balance, Eleanor turned to Daniel, effectively dismissing my comment. Your father is concerned about the Eastern property development. He thinks you should reconsider your proposal before the board meeting. And just like that, I was sidelined from the conversation, relegated to the role of silent server as they discussed family business. I watched Daniel transform before my eyes, his posture straightening, his vocabulary shifting into the particular cadence the Wilsons adopted when discussing money and power. This was a side of him I rarely saw at home, the Wilson heir apparent, eager for paternal approval, responding to his mother's subtle cues like a well-trained performer. I excused myself to fetch dessert, escaping to the kitchen where I gripped the cool marble countertop, breathing deeply. The assessment book's words echoed in my mind. Questions, traditions rather than embracing them. Shows concerning independent streak. I had always thought my marriage was a partnership. Now I was beginning to understand it was more like a job I was failing at, with quarterly reviews I never knew I was receiving. Need any help? Daniel appeared in the doorway, startling me. Just getting the coffee, I said, gesturing to the French press. Your mother's requested dessert plates warmed to exactly 98 degrees, served with a side of my complete submission to Wilson family protocols. His brow furrowed. What? Nothing, I sighed. Bad joke. Daniel moved closer, resting his hands on my shoulders. You've been off all night. What's going on? For one wild moment, I considered telling him everything, showing him the photocopied pages, demanding to know if he was part of this twisted evaluation system. But Eleanor's voice drifted in from the dining room, and the moment passed. Just tired, I said, leaning into his touch despite everything. And your mother can be intense, he finished for me, kissing the top of my head. I know, but she means well. Did she? Did any of them? Let's get this dessert served so she can head home, Daniel said, picking up the coffee tray. Then it's just you and me. I followed him back to the dining room, pasting on a smile that felt brittle as sugar glass. Just 2 more hours, I told myself. 2 more hours of performance, and then I could breathe. Eleanor departed shortly after 9, leaving behind a cloud of expensive perfume and a list of helpful suggestions about everything from my hair, perhaps a more conservative cut, to our guest bedroom decor, a bit too modern for potential, nursery conversion. I stood with Daniel on our front porch, waving as her luxury sedan pulled away from the curb. The moment her taillights disappeared around the corner, I let my smile drop, rolling my shoulders to release the tension that had accumulated over the evening. That wasn't so bad, Daniel said, wrapping an arm around my waist as we headed inside. Though Mom did mention you seemed distracted. Did she? I kept my voice carefully neutral. What else did she mention about me? Daniel laughed. Don't start. You know she cares about you. Does she? The question slipped out before I could stop it, sharper than intended. He pulled away slightly, studying my face. What's that supposed to mean? I backpedaled, fear suddenly coursing through me. I wasn't ready for this confrontation, not yet, not without more information. Nothing, I said, forcing a smile. Your mom's lovely, just intense, like you said. Daniel seemed satisfied with this explanation, pulling me closer as we headed upstairs. But as he drifted off to sleep beside me later that night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the assessment books hidden in the attic above us. Thinking about the ratings, the recommendations, the clinical dissection of my personality flaws. Thinking about what would happen when my score inevitably dropped below the threshold of Wilson family tolerance. Morning arrived with a text from Megan. Coffee? Need update? I replied quickly, can't today. Family dinner tonight. We'll call tomorrow. Daniel was already gone, having left early for a breakfast meeting with his father and brother. The house felt eerily quiet as I moved through my morning routine, every object suddenly suspect. Had our home always contained this many photographs of the Wilson family? Had Eleanor always been so prominently featured in our living spaces? In the shower, a memory surfaced, Daniel suggesting we replace my colorful shower curtain with the more sophisticated glass doors his mother had recommended. At the time, I'd attributed it to his evolving taste. Now I wondered if it had been another item on a Wilson family checklist, another small adjustment to bring me in line with their expectations. I was halfway through editing a corporate photo shoot when my phone rang. Jennifer, Daniel's sister. "Becca, are you busy?" Her voice had the overbright quality it always carried, like someone perpetually on the verge of delivering exciting news. "Just working," I said cautiously. "What's up?" "I was wondering if you wanted to go shopping for the retreat. I need some new outfits, and Olivia's busy with the kids." An unusual invitation. Jennifer and I maintained cordial relations, but rarely spent time together one-on-one. I hesitated, suspicion flaring, then realized this might be exactly the opportunity I needed. "Actually, that sounds perfect," I said. "I could use a break." 2 hours later, I found myself trailing Jennifer through Oak Ridge's upscale boutique district, carrying bags from stores I typically avoided due to their exorbitant pricing. Jennifer moved through the shops with practiced ease, the sales associates greeting her by name. "You simply must try this," she insisted, holding up a conservative blue dress that looked eerily similar to ones Eleanor often wore. "It would look stunning on you." "Not really my style," I demurred, moving toward a rack of more colorful options. Jennifer's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Mom always says it's important to dress for the role you want in life." There. It was, the subtle pressure, the careful guidance toward Wilson-approved choices. I wondered what Jennifer's initial ratings had been, how long it had taken to mold her into the perfect Wilson daughter-in-law. "What an interesting philosophy," I said, selecting a vibrant green dress instead. "I've always believed in dressing authentically." A flicker of something? Envy? Frustration? Crossed Jennifer's face before her smile reasserted itself. "Of course, you creative types have your own flair." We settled into a cafe for lunch, surrounded by shopping bags, bearing designer labels. As Jennifer chatted about retreat preparations, I studied her with new eyes. Her gestures, her opinions, even her lunch order, grilled chicken salad, dressing on the side, all seemed carefully calibrated, as if selected from a Wilson family menu of acceptable behaviors. "So, how are things with you and Daniel?" she asked, her question casual but her gaze sharp. "Good," I replied, matching her light tone. "Busy, but good." "That's nice." She stirred her iced tea meticulously. "You know, Kevin and I went through a rough patch a few years ago. It can be so hard adjusting to family expectations." I maintained a neutral expression despite the alarm bells ringing in my head. "Oh?" Jennifer nodded. "I just wasn't fitting in the way everyone hoped. But Mom was so helpful. Those private lunches with her were a lifesaver." Private lunches. The assessment had recommended Eleanor schedule additional private lunches with me to reinforce expectations. "What kind of advice did she give you?" I asked, feigning innocent curiosity. Jennifer's perfectly manicured hand waved dismissively. "Oh, just little things. How to anticipate Kevin's needs, how to support the family image, the importance of knowing when to speak and when to listen." She leaned forward, lowering her voice conspiratorially. Between us, I was headed for disaster before Mom stepped in. My first-year assessment was, well, let's just say it wasn't promising. My heart stopped. "Assessment?" She froze momentarily, then laughed too brightly. "Oh, you know what I mean. Those early judgments people make when you join a family. First impressions and all that. She knew. Jennifer knew about the rating system. Was she testing me? Warning? Me? Right, I said carefully. First impressions can be tough. The conversation moved on, but the tension remained, a current running beneath our superficial chat about fashion and family gossip. When we finally parted ways outside the cafe, Jennifer hugged me tightly, too tightly. Remember, she whispered, her breath warm against my ear. Family comes first, always. It sounded less like advice and more like a warning. That evening, I arrived at the Wilson family home for dinner with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. The massive colonial house loomed against the darkening sky, every window lit with warm, inviting light that I now recognized as camouflage for the cold calculation happening within. Richard greeted me at the door, his familiar bear hug feeling oddly threatening now that I knew what happened in his study during those assessment meetings. "Becca, Daniel's running late. Conference call with some investors." He ushered me inside, his hand heavy on my shoulder. "Eleanor's in the kitchen, but come say hello to Harold first." Harold Bennett, the family lawyer, the man whose signature appeared on the confidentiality agreements I'd found referenced in the assessment books. Agreements signed by every Wilson spouse, apparently during the retreat immediately following their first anniversary, an agreement I had no memory of signing. Harold stood by the fireplace, tumbler of scotch in hand, deep in conversation with Thomas. Both men turned as we approached, their smiles polished and professional. "Rebecca," Harold nodded. "Lovely to see you again. I was just telling Tom about that property near your photography studio. Quite a valuable location." My studio, the lease I'd fought so hard to secure on my own, without Wilson family assistance. The space that represented my independence. "Is it?" I kept my voice even. I hadn't heard anything about development plans for that area. Thomas and Richard exchanged, a glance I couldn't interpret. "Just preliminary discussions," Richard said dismissively. "Nothing concrete." Before I could press further, Eleanor swept into the room, resplendent in a dress nearly identical to the blue one Jennifer had tried to persuade me to buy. "Rebecca, darling, no Daniel yet?" She kissed the air beside my cheek. "Men and their work, always keeping us waiting. Come help me in the kitchen." It wasn't a request. I followed her through the house, past walls lined with Wilson family photographs tracking generations of carefully curated success. In the gleaming kitchen, a showcase space Eleanor used primarily for directing the staff who actually prepared the meals, she handed me an apron without looking up from the salad she was artfully arranging. "Jennifer mentioned you had a lovely shopping trip," she said. "Though she was disappointed you didn't find that blue dress suitable. It would have complemented your coloring beautifully." Of course, Jennifer had reported back. I wondered if my rejection of the dress would be noted. In this year's assessment, I preferred something with more personality, I said, carefully measuring my tone to avoid sounding defensive. Eleanor's hands paused momentarily. Personality is an interesting choice of priority in fashion. The statement hung between us, loaded with unspoken judgment. "Daniel mentioned you've been different lately, distracted." "Work has been demanding," I offered, focusing on the vegetables I'd been assigned to chop. "Creative businesses have natural ebbs and flows." "Indeed." She moved closer, her Chanel perfume enveloping me like a too-tight embrace. Though one must be careful not to let professional concerns overshadow personal responsibilities. "Balance, as you said last night, is important." She placed a hand on mine, halting my chopping. "Your happiness means a great deal to this family, Rebecca. We want to see you thrive. Appropriately." The threat was velvet-wrapped but unmistakable. I looked into Eleanor's eyes, the same warm brown as Daniel's but lacking any genuine warmth, and saw calculation, assessment, the continuous recalibration of strategy. "I appreciate your concern," I said, gently reclaiming my hand. Family means everything to me, too. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I'm so pleased to hear that. The retreat will be an excellent opportunity for us all to realign our priorities. The arrival of the catering staff spared me from further conversation, and soon the dining room was filled with Wilson family members, each playing their assigned role with practiced precision. I watched them with new awareness. The way Richard controlled discussions through strategic interruptions, how Eleanor signaled approval or disapproval through subtle gestures, the synchronized responses of the spouses who had successfully integrated into the system. Daniel arrived halfway through the first course, apologetic and harried, slipping into the seat beside me with a quick kiss to my temple. Sorry, investors had concerns about the projections. Had to walk them through everything line by line. We were just discussing the retreat, Eleanor said, smoothly redirecting the conversation. Rebecca seems quite enthusiastic this year. All eyes turned to me, expectant. I felt like a specimen under a microscope, each reaction cataloged and interpreted according to Wilson family metrics. Absolutely, I smiled, channeling Jennifer's bright, artificial enthusiasm. I'm particularly looking forward to the family traditions. A ripple of something, surprise, approval, moved around the table. Daniel squeezed my knee under the tablecloth. Wonderful, Richard boomed from the head of the table. The retreat is the cornerstone of our family culture. Continuity, legacy, values passed from generation to generation. Speaking of generations, Eleanor interjected smoothly, Olivia was sharing the most delightful news about Thomas Jr.'s school achievements, following in his father's footsteps already. And just like that, the conversation pivoted to the next generation of Wilsons, to the children I had failed to provide, to the continuation of a legacy I was increasingly certain I wanted no part of. As the dinner progressed, I observed the dynamics with the detached precision I usually reserved for photographic compositions. Thomas dominated conversations about business, deferring only to Richard. Jennifer managed the social calendar discussions, always checking with Eleanor before finalizing plans. Olivia spoke primarily about the children, careful to emphasize how they were being raised according to family traditions. Kevin and Daniel occupied similar spaces in the hierarchy, respected but clearly subordinate to the older generation, their contributions carefully measured against Wilson standards. Both displayed the same unconscious habits, checking with Richard before expressing opinions on business matters, echoing Eleanor's social judgments as if they were their own. I wondered if they realized how synchronized they had become, how thoroughly the Wilson family machinery had incorporated them. I wondered if Daniel knew he was becoming a carbon copy of his father, if he would expect me to transform into Eleanor in turn. The thought made me feel physically ill. Are you all right, dear? Eleanor's voice cut through my thoughts. You've gone quite pale. Just a headache, I murmured, reaching for my water glass. Nothing serious. Perhaps you should head home early, she suggested, her concern performative but her intent clear. My discomfort was disrupting the carefully orchestrated family dinner. Daniel can stay and finish discussing the Johnson property with Richard and Harold. That's not necessary, I began, but Daniel was already nodding in agreement. You have looked tired all day, he said, his concern genuine even as he unconsciously aligned with his mother's suggestion. I can catch a ride with Tom later. Just like that, I was dismissed, excused from the inner circle to go home and recover from whatever feminine weakness had overcome me. Eleanor summoned their housekeeper to call me a car, refusing my protests that I could drive myself. Nonsense. In your condition? We insist. 20 minutes later, I found myself alone in our empty house, unceremoniously removed from the Wilson family gathering the moment I displayed signs of deviation from their expected behaviors. I kicked off the sensible heels Eleanor had once complimented, another piece of evidence I'd overlooked, and went directly to my home office. From a locked drawer in my desk, I retrieved the folder of photocopied assessment pages, spreading them across the surface like puzzle pieces. There was a pattern here, beyond the obvious control mechanisms. Spouses with consistently low ratings disappeared through divorce, geographic relocation, or mysterious career opportunities in distant cities. But what happened to those who knew about the system and threatened to expose it? There was no record of such an event in any of the books I'd found, perhaps because such threats were handled outside the official record. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Everything okay? Mom's worried about you." Not, "I'm worried about you." Not, "I miss you." But, "Mom's worried about you." I didn't respond immediately, instead opening my laptop and navigating to a hidden folder of photography files. Inside were shots I'd taken at various Wilson family gatherings over the years. Candid moments captured between the official poses. Expressions caught when people thought no one was watching. Eleanor's calculating gaze as she observed Jennifer interacting with a business associate. Richard's flash of anger when Thomas questioned a development strategy. The empty look in Olivia's eyes as she mechanically praised her mother-in-law's taste in home decor. A new determination took root inside me. The retreat was 3 weeks away. 3 weeks to gather evidence, to understand the full scope of the Wilson family system, to determine if my husband was a willing participant or another victim. 3 weeks to decide if my marriage was worth saving. I picked up my phone and finally replied to Daniel. Just needed some quiet. "Feeling better already? See you when you get home." Then I sent a message to Megan. "Need your help with something. How do you feel about a road trip to Lake Willowbrook next month?" Her response came immediately. "I'm in, whatever you need." I stared at the assessment pages spread across my desk, at the clinical dissection of my personhood, at the systematic erasure of any traits that didn't conform to Wilson family standards. "Time to turn the tables," I whispered to the empty room. "Let's see how you all score when someone's finally watching." Part 3. The Investigation. The first rays of dawn filtered through our bedroom curtains as I carefully extracted myself from Daniel's embrace. He murmured something incoherent, then rolled over, still deep in Saturday morning sleep. I watched him for a moment, the gentle rise and fall of his chest, the familiar curve of his shoulder, the faint worry line that had appeared between his brows even in slumber. When had that line become permanent? When had we both started carrying the weight of Wilson expectations even into our dreams? I dressed silently, gathering my camera equipment with practiced efficiency. My cover story was simple and believable, an early morning landscape shoot at Harrington Park, something I often did when working on my personal portfolio. Daniel wouldn't question it. He'd grown accustomed to my creative schedule. The drive to Harold Bennett's office took 15 minutes. Downtown Oak Ridge was nearly deserted at 6:30 a.m., empty parking spaces lining the streets where normally I'd have to circle the block multiple times. I pulled into the alley behind the stately brick building that housed Bennett and Associates, parking where the security cameras wouldn't catch my vehicle. Megan was already waiting, leaning against her car, 2 coffee cups in hand. "You're sure about this?" she asked, handing me the larger cup. Breaking into a law office is several steps beyond gathering family dirt. "We're not breaking in," I corrected, sipping the much-needed caffeine. "We're using the key that Harold's assistant conveniently leaves under the back mat every Friday for the weekend cleaning crew. The key you happened to notice when dropping off those contract photos last month." "Exactly." I pulled a pair of disposable gloves from my bag, offering her a second pair. "And we're not stealing anything, just photographing. If there are records of these spouse evaluations, they'll be in Harold's files." Megan sighed but pulled the gloves on. "I still think going to the police would be simpler." "And tell them?" "What? That my in-laws have a creepy scoring system for family members? That's not illegal, just deeply disturbing." I checked my watch. "The security system doesn't activate again until 8 hour. Let's move." The key was exactly where I'd seen it before, and moments later we were inside the hushed wood-paneled hallways of Bennett and Associates. Harold's corner office was unlocked, another small-town habit that worked in our favor. "What exactly are we looking for?" Megan whispered, even though we were alone in the building. "Contracts, confidentiality agreements, anything related to the Wilson family retreat or spouse integration." I moved directly to the imposing filing cabinet behind Harold's desk. The assessment books mentioned legal documents but didn't specify what they contained. The cabinet was locked, but the key hung on a small hook inside Harold's desk drawer, organized and accessible, the habit of a man who never expected anyone to breach his private space. "Here," I said, pulling open the drawer labeled W. "Wilson Family Holdings, Wilson Properties, Wilson Trust, Wilson Retreat Protocols." The folder was thick, filled with documents dating back decades. I laid it on Harold's desk and began systematically photographing each page while Megan kept watch at the door. "Oh my God," I breathed as I flipped through the contents. "Megan, look at this." She joined me at the desk, peering over my shoulder at the document in my hands. "Post-marriage integration procedures." It's a manual, a literal manual for how to bring new spouses into the Wilson family system. I turned the page. "Listen to this. Phase 1. Observation and assessment. Duration. First year of marriage. During this period, family members will document spouse behaviors, responses to guidance, and willingness to adapt to Wilson family expectations. Monthly reports to be submitted to the Family Council for preliminary scoring." Family Council, Richard, Eleanor, and Harold apparently. I continued reading. Phase 2, Alignment, Duration, Years 2 through 5, Systematic Adjustment of spouse behaviors through guided interventions, including career redirection, social circle refinement, and financial dependence strategies. Quarterly assessments determine progression to Phase 3. Megan's face had gone pale. "What's Phase 3? I flipped the page. Phase 3, Integration or Dissolution. For spouses meeting minimum assessment thresholds, full incorporation into family hierarchy with appropriate responsibilities and restricted privileges. For spouses failing to achieve minimum standards, implementation of separation protocol alpha or beta, depending on risk assessment." Separation protocol? They make it sound like eliminating a business liability. I finished, my voice hollow. "Look at this, a list of former spouses, each with a protocol designation and outcome summary." The list included names I recognized from family photographs, along with others I'd never heard mentioned. Beside each was a clinical description of how their marriages had ended. Accepted career opportunity in Seattle, Protocol Alpha, financial incentive. Divorce initiated after documented infidelity, Protocol Beta, evidence creation. Voluntary withdrawal following health concerns, Protocol Alpha, medical management. Evidence creation? Megan's voice had dropped to a horrified whisper. Medical management? Becca, this is beyond controlling. This is criminal. I photographed every page methodically, hands steady despite the churning in my stomach. Here's the retreat schedule for this year. Look at the session marked Spouse Evaluation Annual Review. It's scheduled during the hiking excursion they arrange for the newer family members. The one you're supposed to attend? Yes, but I won't be hiking. I'll be getting evidence of exactly what happens in that session. I closed the folder, carefully returning it to its exact position in the filing cabinet. There's more we need. Harold mentioned a prenuptial addendum that all Wilson spouses signed during their first retreat. It must be here somewhere. We searched through several more drawers before finding a heavy accordion file labeled Wilson Family Agreements. Inside were individual folders for each married couple. Daniel and Rebecca Wilson, I murmured, pulling our folder. Inside was our prenuptial agreement, standard, straightforward, the one I remembered signing before our wedding. But behind, it was another document titled Loyalty and Integration Covenant. My signature was at the bottom. "I never signed this," I whispered, staring at the perfect forgery of my handwriting. "Never even saw it." Megan leaned closer. "What does it say?" "It's essentially a contract giving the Wilson family authority to guide and direct our marriage, finances, and personal development. There are clauses about family approval of all major life decisions, appropriate privacy boundaries, and acceptance of hierarchical family governance." "But you didn't sign it?" "Someone did." I photographed the document, focusing particularly on the signature. "And they did a good enough job that it would hold up unless specifically challenged by a handwriting expert." I checked every other spouse's folder. Each contained an identical covenant, signed and notarized during their first family retreat. "We need to go," Megan said, checking her watch. "It's almost 7:30. We carefully replaced everything, locked the cabinets, and erased all evidence of our presence. As we slipped out the back door, replacing the key under the mat, the weight of what we'd discovered settled over me like a physical burden. "What are you going to do?" Megan asked as we reached our cars. "Keep gathering evidence. I need to understand exactly how this system works, who's involved, and—" I hesitated, the question I'd been avoiding finally taking shape. "And whether Daniel is a victim or a perpetrator." The look in Megan's eyes told me she'd been wondering the same thing. "Be careful," she said, squeezing my arm. "These people are methodical. If they suspect you're onto them—" "I know." I forced a smile. "I'll see you Tuesday for coffee. Normal place, normal time. If I don't show up—" "I'll call the police immediately," she finished. "And Becca?" "Maybe sleep in the guest room tonight. Say you're fighting a migraine or something." I nodded, the suggestion resonating with my growing unease. How could I lie beside Daniel now, knowing what his family was capable of? Knowing that somewhere in those files might be the beginning of a protocol with my name on it. When I returned home, Daniel was in the kitchen making pancakes, his weekend ritual unchanged in all the years I'd known him. He looked up with a smile that still made my heart ache despite everything. "Hey, you. Get any good shots?" "A few," I said, setting down my camera bag carefully. The light was perfect. He slid a plate toward me, blueberry pancakes arranged in a smiley face the way he knew I liked. Such a small, caring gesture from a man whose family orchestrated the systematic control and disposal of uncooperative spouses. "You look exhausted," he said, studying my face with genuine concern. "Still not sleeping well?" Just that time of year. Clients wanting holiday portraits, everyone rushing before year-end. I took a bite of pancake, forcing myself to maintain normalcy. "What's on your agenda today?" "Meeting Dad and Tom at the club for golf, then dinner at their place. Family strategy session for the Riverfront project." He looked apologetic. "I know we talked about a date night, but Dad insisted everyone needed to be there." Richard insisting. The Wilson family machine in motion, gears turning inexorably. "It's fine," I said, though it wasn't. Nothing was fine anymore. "I have editing to catch up on anyway." Daniel kissed the top of my head as he moved past me to refill his coffee. "You work too hard. After the retreat, we should take some real time off. Maybe that trip to Prague you've been wanting?" The trip I'd suggested 2 years ago, that Eleanor had diplomatically redirected toward a family vacation in Aspen instead. I wondered what had changed. Was this Daniel genuinely considering my wishes, or was it a strategic concession recommended in my last assessment? "That would be nice," I said carefully, "if we can coordinate our schedules." "I'll make it happen," he promised with a certainty that now felt ominous rather than reassuring. What strings would be pulled? What arrangements made to ensure our trip served Wilson family purposes? After Daniel left for golf, I transferred the photographs from the law office to my secure external hard drive, then spent hours analyzing them, cataloging the evidence, looking for patterns and vulnerabilities in the Wilson system. The more I read, the clearer it became. This wasn't just an eccentric family tradition. It was a sophisticated control mechanism, refined over generations, designed to protect and expand the Wilson empire by ensuring every member, by blood or marriage, served their designated purpose, and those who couldn't or wouldn't comply disappeared in carefully managed ways, their exits orchestrated to minimize disruption and eliminate potential threats to the family's reputation and control. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "Wondering if you'd like to join me and Olivia for spa day tomorrow? Perfect pre-retreat relaxation." Another unusual invitation. 2 in 1 week after years of polite distance. Were they watching me more closely now? Had my score dropped further? Or was Eleanor deploying her daughter-in-law team for those mentoring sessions mentioned in my assessment? I texted back, "Sounds lovely. What time?" Playing along was my best strategy now, appearing to embrace Wilson family connection while quietly gathering the evidence I needed. That evening, I created a secure email account and sent copies of the most damning documents to Megan, with instructions to release them to specific journalists if anything happened to me. Paranoid, perhaps, but the clinical descriptions of medical, management, and evidence creation in those protocols left little room for naivety. Daniel returned home just after 11, smelling of cigars and whiskey, the Wilson men's post-golf tradition. He moved through our bedroom with unusual carefulness, clearly trying not to wake me as I pretended to sleep. "Becca?" he whispered. "You awake?" I kept my breathing deep and regular. After a moment, I heard him sigh, then the soft sound of him opening and closing his desk drawer. Curious, I risked cracking one eye open slightly. Daniel stood by the window, phone in hand, typing something with focused concentration. When he finished, he deleted the message thread, a habit I'd never seen him practice before, then plugged in his phone and prepared for bed. Once I was certain he was asleep, I carefully extracted myself from the covers and moved to his phone, on the nightstand. The screen was locked, of course, but I knew his password. His mother's birthday, a detail that now seemed telling rather than sentimental. Nothing unusual in his recent calls or visible text threads. Whatever he'd sent had been thoroughly deleted. I replaced the phone exactly as I'd found it and returned to my side of the bed, mind racing with new questions and suspicions. The spa day with Jennifer and Olivia proved even more illuminating than I'd anticipated. Wrapped in plush robes, faces covered in expensive clay masks, the two women gradually relaxed their guard, especially after a second round of mimosas. "So," Jennifer sighed, leaning back in her chair as a technician worked on her feet, "are you ready for the retreat evaluation?" I kept my expression neutral despite my racing pulse. As ready as I can be, I suppose. Olivia and Jennifer exchanged glances. "First one is the hardest," Olivia offered sympathetically. "After that, you at least know what to expect." "What should I expect?" I asked, intentionally projecting vulnerability. Jennifer hesitated, but Olivia, perhaps due to the mimosas, perhaps from genuine empathy, leaned closer. "Directness," she said quietly. "They'll tell you exactly where you're falling short. It's brutal, but efficient." She gave a hollow laugh. "My first evaluation, I cried for 3 days afterward. Tom almost divorced me on the spot for embarrassing him." "Eleanor intervened," Jennifer added, as if this was something to be grateful for. "Said you were a promising investment, just needed proper guidance." Investment, the same clinical terminology from the assessment books. "And did the guidance help?" I asked carefully. Olivia's smile had a brittle quality. "Of course. Eleanor has been instrumental in helping me understand my role." "Mom's methods can seem harsh," Jennifer acknowledged. But she gets results. My Kevin went from a headstrong, independent businessman to a true Wilson in under 2 years. And he's happy? I couldn't stop myself from asking. Jennifer looked genuinely confused. Of course. He's successful, respected, part of a powerful family. Why wouldn't he be happy? Because success and respect came with the price of surrender, of submission to the Wilson family machine. But I kept that thought to myself. I just want to make sure I'm doing everything right, I said instead. Daniel deserves a wife who fits into his family properly. The words tasted bitter, but they had the desired effect. Both women visibly relaxed, moving into mentoring mode. The key is anticipation, Olivia said earnestly. Learn to predict what they want before they have to tell you. And never, ever question Richard's business decisions in public, Jennifer added. Private disagreement is acceptable, encouraged even if you have legitimate insight, but public solidarity is non-negotiable. What about Eleanor's guidance? I asked. Sometimes I find it difficult to distinguish between suggestions and requirements. Another exchanged glance. They're all requirements, Jennifer said simply. Some just have more flexibility in execution than others. The sooner you stop seeing it as control and start seeing it as opportunity, the happier you'll be, Olivia added, her voice carrying the practiced cadence of a frequently repeated phrase. Eleanor's words, I suspected, regurgitated by a spouse who had learned her lessons well. What happens to people who don't adapt? I asked, working to keep my tone curious rather than pointed. A moment of tense silence followed. Finally, Jennifer spoke, her voice lowered despite our private room. They're given every opportunity to succeed, Becca. Multiple chances, extensive support. The family isn't unreasonable. But if someone truly can't fit in, I pressed. Then it's better for everyone if they exit gracefully, Olivia said, her tone suddenly formal. The family always ensures appropriate arrangements are made. What kind of arrangements? Jennifer's smile had turned brittle. Financial settlements, career opportunities, whatever makes the transition smooth. I see. I matched her smile with equal artifice. Well, I'm grateful for your guidance. I want nothing more than to be a proper Wilson wife. The tension dissipated, and for the remainder of our spa day, I played the role of eager student, absorbing their advice while noting every revealing comment, every inadvertent confirmation of what I'd found in those files. By the time we parted with air kisses and promises to coordinate our retreat wardrobes, I had a much clearer picture of my position in the Wilson hierarchy, and the precariousness of that position. That evening, I met Megan at a restaurant one town over, where no Wilson associates would accidentally spot us. Over pasta and wine, I shared what I'd learned. So, the spa day was basically them trying to coach you into being a better corporate wife? She asked, visibly appalled. More like warning me, I said, pushing my barely touched food around my plate. Jennifer practically confirmed that the family arranges exits for non-compliant spouses. They kept emphasizing how many chances people are given before being removed. And Daniel? Any clarity there? I sighed, the question weighing on me more heavily with each passing day. He's been different, more secretive, deleting text messages, having private conversations with his parents. But whether that's him reporting on me or being pressured himself, I can't tell. Megan reached across the table, squeezing my hand. The retreat's next weekend. Are you sure you want to go through with this? We have enough evidence already to confront Daniel. Evidence of a creepy family system, yes, but not enough to determine who's a willing participant and who's a victim. I pulled out my phone, showing her the schematics of the Lake Willowbrook property I'd downloaded. I need to witness that evaluation session. I need to hear what they say about me, about the other spouses, when they think no one's listening. And if Daniel is part of it, if he's been evaluating you all along? The possibility cut deep, despite my attempts to prepare for it. Then I'll know our marriage was built on surveillance and control, not love. And I'll leave with documentation of every manipulative, potentially illegal thing the Wilson family has done. Be careful, Megan warned. People who create systems this elaborate don't respond well to being exposed. I nodded, thinking of the protocols detailed in Harold's files. That's why I've taken precautions. If anything happens to me, anything at all, those files go public. I've made sure of it. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Megan raised her wine glass in a grim toast to taking down the Wilson family rating system. To the truth, I countered, clinking my glass against hers. Whatever it turns out to be. The week before the retreat passed in a blur of careful preparation and performance. By day, I played the role of increasingly compliant Wilson wife, seeking Eleanor's advice on retreat attire, accompanying Daniel to a family foundation event without complaint, even scheduling lunch with Harold's wife to discuss more involvement with the charity committee. By night, I meticulously prepared my surveillance equipment, researched the legal implications of the documents I'd discovered, and drafted contingency plans for every scenario I could imagine. Daniel seemed pleased by my apparent embrace of Wilson family life, though I caught him watching me with occasional puzzlement, as if trying to reconcile this new, amenable version of his wife with the independent woman he'd married. "You seem different lately," he commented one evening as we prepared for bed. "More engaged with the family." I kept my tone light. "Just taking your mother's advice, making more of an effort." "It suits you," he said, and something in his expression made my heart ache. Was that relief in his eyes? Relief that I was finally conforming, finally becoming the Wilson wife I was expected to be? "The retreat will be good for us," I said, testing him. "A chance to really understand our place in the family." He paused, toothbrush halfway to his mouth. "What do you mean by that?" I maintained a neutral smile. "Just that it's important to honor traditions, to fully participate. I know how much the retreat means to your parents." Daniel's posture relaxed slightly. "Right. Yes, they're really looking forward to having everyone together." He hesitated, then added, "Mom mentioned you've been spending time with Jennifer and Olivia. That's great." "They've been very welcoming," I said carefully. "Very informative about family expectations." Something flickered across his face. Concern, guilt, before he nodded. "Good. That's good." He said nothing more on the subject, but later that night, I heard him, on the phone in his office, voice too low to distinguish words, but tone unmistakably urgent. The day before our departure for Lake Willowbrook, I met with Megan one final time, providing her with updated documentation and contingency instructions. "If I don't contact you by Sunday evening, call this number," I said, handing her a card with a private investigator's information. She's already been briefed and paid a retainer, then released the first set of documents to these journalists. I passed her another list. "And if you do contact me? Then we proceed based on what I discover." I took a deep breath. If Daniel is innocent in all this, if he's as controlled and evaluated as the rest of us, then I'll confront him privately, show him the evidence, offer him the chance to break free with me. And if he's not innocent? I met her gaze steadily. Then I'll implement my own exit strategy, one the Wilsons won't see coming. As I drove home that afternoon, rehearsing scenarios and contingency plans, a strange calm settled over me. In just a few days, I would know the truth about my marriage, about the family I'd joined, about the man I'd pledged my life to. Whatever that truth revealed, I would no longer be the unaware subject of their secret assessments. I would no longer be rated and evaluated against metrics I didn't know existed. One way or another, I would reclaim my story from the Wilson family's controlling grip. Daniel was packing when I arrived home, methodically folding the retreat wardrobe Eleanor had essentially prescribed for him years ago. Watching him, I wondered if he realized how thoroughly his choices had been shaped, how completely the Wilson family machinery had molded him into a perfect component. "All set for tomorrow?" he asked, looking up with a smile that still made my heart twist painfully. "Almost," I said, returning his smile with practiced ease. "Just a few last-minute things to pack." "I'm glad you're coming around on the retreat," he said, his tone careful but hopeful. "It really is important to the family." Family. Not my family or our family, but the family, a separate entity with its own will and demands. Had I ever noticed that phrasing before? Had I registered the dozens of little tells that might have revealed the truth sooner? "I understand that now," I said, and it wasn't entirely a lie. I did understand exactly how the retreat functioned in the Wilson family system, as the central mechanism for control and evaluation, for reinforcing hierarchy and expectations. Daniel crossed the room, pulling me into an embrace that felt both familiar and suddenly foreign. "It's going to be a great weekend," he murmured against my hair. "A new chapter for us." A new chapter indeed, I thought, as I returned his embrace automatically. Just not the one he was expecting. That night, as Daniel slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, mentally reviewing my preparations one final time. The surveillance equipment was disguised within my photography gear, something I was known to carry everywhere, that would raise no suspicions. The backup documentation was securely distributed. The contingency plans were in place. Tomorrow, we would drive to Lake Willowbrook. Tomorrow, the Wilson family would gather for their annual retreat, for their secret evaluations and assessments. Tomorrow, I would finally learn whether I was fighting to save my marriage or escape it. Part 4. The Confrontation Lake. Willowbrook emerged from the morning mist like something from a fairy tale. A sprawling lodge of timber and stone nestled among towering pines, its reflection shimmering on the water's surface. Under different circumstances, I might have immediately reached for my camera, eager to capture the play of light through fog, the architectural harmony with nature. Instead, I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my focus entirely on the task ahead. Daniel had insisted on driving separately. "A quick detour to pick up some papers from Dad's attorney," he'd explained. The solitary drive had given me time to mentally prepare, to transition fully into the role I would play this weekend, while constantly staying alert for any sign of danger. A young attendant in Wilson Properties' branded attire directed me to a parking space, then began unloading our luggage with practiced efficiency. "Mrs. Wilson, welcome back to Willowbrook. Mr. Richard and Mrs. Eleanor have already arrived. They're in the main lodge." Of course they had arrived first, the king and queen taking their thrones before the court assembled. I thanked the attendant and made my way toward the imposing main entrance, camera bag slung over my shoulder as casually as possible, despite the surveillance equipment nestled among my lenses. The great room looked exactly as it had during my previous visits: a soaring cathedral ceiling, massive stone fireplace, plush seating arrangements carefully positioned for both comfort and subtle hierarchical messaging. The prime spots near the fireplace were reserved for Richard and Eleanor, with the rest of the family arranged around them according to status. Eleanor spotted me immediately, rising with the practiced grace that made every movement seem both effortless and choreographed. "Rebecca, darling, you're earlier than expected." Her kiss brushed the air beside my cheek. Daniel mentioned he'd be arriving separately. "I wanted to get some morning shots of the lake," I explained, patting my camera bag. "The light is perfect right now." Always the artist. Her smile conveyed both indulgence and mild disapproval. "Well, you have plenty of time before lunch. Thomas and Olivia should arrive within the hour, and Jennifer and Kevin are already settling into their cabin." The Wilson retreat followed. The same schedule each year: arrival day for settling in and preliminary discussions, followed by 2 days of family bonding activities, carefully structured to reinforce the hierarchy while providing the appearance of relaxed leisure. "I think I'll freshen up first," I said, matching her polite smile. "Which cabin are Daniel and I in this year?" "Pine Hollow, same as last time. Richard prefers consistency in the arrangements." She gestured to a hovering staff member. "Marcus, we'll show you." As I followed the attendant along the wooded path to our cabin, I mentally reviewed the property layout. Pine Hollow was positioned midway between the main lodge and the boathouse, a location that reflected Daniel's middle-tier status in the family hierarchy. Richard and Eleanor occupied the largest cabin with the best view. Thomas and Olivia, as the oldest son and his wife, stayed in the cabin nearest to Richard and Eleanor's. Jennifer and Kevin were housed on the other side. The positioning wasn't accidental. Everything in the Wilson universe had purpose, meaning, message. Pine Hollow was exactly as I remembered, rustic luxury designed to appear effortlessly comfortable, while actually representing significant wealth and privilege. I tipped Marcus generously, then secured the door behind him before beginning a methodical sweep of the cabin. I checked for hidden cameras in light fixtures, vents, smoke detectors. I examined the landline phone for signs of tampering. I inspected the walls for unusual wiring or recently patched areas. Nothing seemed overtly suspicious, but I knew better than to assume privacy in a Wilson-controlled space. From my camera bag, I removed a small electronic device Megan had sourced through a security contact, a signal detector designed to identify surveillance equipment. I moved through each room slowly, watching for alerts. The device remained silent until I entered the bathroom, where it emitted a soft beep near the decorative mirror. A careful examination revealed a tiny camera built into the frame, angled toward the shower. I felt a surge of nausea, followed by cold rage. How long had this been here? Had it been installed recently, or had we been under surveillance during previous retreats without my knowledge? I left it untouched. Disabling it would alert them to my awareness, but made a mental note to avoid the bathroom for anything private. Instead, I unpacked methodically, arranging my clothing in the dresser with a precision that would satisfy Eleanor's expectations while concealing small recording devices in strategic locations throughout the cabin. By the time I finished, the morning was advancing toward noon. I needed to establish my cover story by actually taking some photographs of the lake. Grabbing my camera, I headed toward the shoreline, alert for any sign of Wilson family members. The lake was still relatively deserted, most guests presumably still arriving or settling in. I took several landscape shots, then turned my attention to the boathouse, the scheduled location for tomorrow's spouse evaluation session. From the shore, I captured several angles of the structure, documenting potential entry points and sightlines. To casual observers, I was simply an enthusiastic photographer. In reality, I was conducting reconnaissance. Getting some good shots? I startled, turning to find Harold Bennett standing a few feet away, his customary wool sweater replaced by casual lakeside attire that somehow still managed to look formal. "Harold, I didn't hear you approach." I lowered my camera, forcing a smile. "Just taking advantage of the morning light." He glanced at my camera, then toward the boathouse I'd been photographing. "Planning to document the entire retreat?" There was something in his tone, a subtle probing that raised my internal alarms. "Just the scenic elements," I assured him. "I know the family discussions are private." He nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Eleanor mentioned you've been showing more interest in family traditions lately. That's good to see, Rebecca. Integration is a process, after all." Integration. The exact terminology from the protocols I'd photographed in his office. I maintained my pleasant expression with effort. "I've come to appreciate how important family cohesion is to the Wilsons," I said, selecting my words carefully. "Indeed." Harold studied my face for a moment longer than comfortable. Well, I should get back. Richard wants to review some documents before the welcome lunch. I believe your husband has arrived, by the way. I saw him heading to your cabin. He strolled away, hands in his pockets, the picture of relaxed affluence. Only once he was out of sight did I allow my shoulders to drop, exhaling the tension his presence had created. Daniel was indeed at the cabin when I returned, unpacking his suitcase with the methodical precision that had once seemed merely tidy, but now felt programmed. "There you are," he said, looking up with a smile. "Get some good photos?" "A few." I set my camera down carefully. The light was better than expected. "Mom mentioned she saw you earlier, said you seemed enthusiastic about the retreat this year." I moved to my suitcase, using the action to hide my expression. "I've been thinking about what you said, about family traditions being important, trying to embrace the Wilson way more fully." Daniel crossed to me, turning me gently to face him. For a moment, he simply looked at me, his eyes searching mine for something I couldn't identify. "What?" I asked, maintaining my neutral expression with effort. "Nothing. You just seem different lately." "Good different or bad different?" "Just different." He brushed a strand of hair from my face, the gesture achingly familiar. "We should head to lunch. You know how Dad feels about punctuality." The welcome lunch was served on the terrace overlooking the lake. The entire Wilson clan arranged around a massive table laden with gourmet food prepared by the private chef Richard employed for these events. I took my assigned seat between Daniel and Jennifer, directly across from Olivia, with Eleanor presiding from the head of the table opposite Richard. As the meal progressed, I observed the family dynamics with new awareness. Richard controlled the conversation flow, allocating speaking time through subtle cues that everyone instantly recognized. Eleanor monitored the spouses, her gaze constantly assessing our posture, engagement, and responses. Thomas and Daniel competed subtly for their father's approval, while Jennifer maintained perfect form as the family mediator, smoothing any conversational rough edges. The spouses played our own roles. Olivia complimented Thomas's points with perfectly timed supporting comments. Kevin provided enthusiastic endorsement of Richard's business insights. And I maintained attentive silence broken only by appropriate questions that showcased Daniel's knowledge without challenging the hierarchy. It was theater, elaborate, rehearsed, with consequences for missed cues I now understood all too well. "Rebecca," Eleanor called from her end of the table, immediately silencing all other conversation. "I understand you've been quite busy with your photography business lately." The question contained a trap: acknowledge too much professional success and appear insufficiently family-focused, downplay my work and appear unsuccessful. I navigated carefully. "It's been a fulfilling balance," I replied. "I've been fortunate to secure clients who understand the importance of family priorities." Eleanor's eyebrow raised slightly. "Indeed, that seems a recent development." "Becca turned down the Westlake corporate campaign," Daniel interjected smoothly. "She felt the travel requirements would interfere with family commitments." This was news to me. I'd never been offered nor declined such a campaign, but I nodded in agreement, noting how Daniel had fabricated evidence of my improved compliance. "How sensible," Eleanor approved. "Finding that balance is so important for a harmonious marriage." Richard cleared his throat, claiming attention. "Speaking of business matters, we'll begin our first session at 3 this afternoon. Harold has prepared the quarterly assessments for review." My pulse quickened. This was it. The initial meeting, where they would discuss family business, including the spouse evaluations. The hiking excursion for newer family members wasn't scheduled until tomorrow, but perhaps I could gather preliminary intelligence today. "Will all the spouses be joining the hike tomorrow?" I asked Jennifer quietly as Richard continued outlining The weekend schedule. She glanced at me, surprised by the question. Just you and Kevin. Olivia's beyond the 3-year mark, so she attends the business sessions now. Another confirmation of the integration phases I'd read about in Harold's files. After 3 years of satisfactory evaluations, spouses graduated to partial inclusion in the inner circle. I'm looking forward to it, I lied. Though I admit I'm curious about these business discussions everyone's so secretive about. Jennifer's expression flickered with something that might have been sympathy. All in good time. First, you have to prove you can. Adapt. The meal concluded with Richard announcing a 2-hour free period before the first session. A calculated break that allowed family members to prepare while maintaining the illusion of relaxed vacation time. Back at our cabin, Daniel changed into more formal attire for the business meeting, his movements increasingly tense. "Everything okay?" I asked, perched on the bed watching him adjust his tie, the same deep burgundy shade Richard favored. "Fine." His response was clipped. "Just a lot to cover in today's session. Dad's been hinting at major structural changes to the business." "Sounds stressful." I kept my tone sympathetic but mildly disinterested, as expected of a spouse who understood her place. "Will it run late? Should I wait to have dinner with you?" "Probably best if you join the other spouses," he said, checking his appearance in the mirror. "These sessions can go for hours." Once Daniel departed for the main lodge, I waited exactly 15 minutes before implementing the next phase of my plan. Changing into hiking attire and grabbing my camera, I left the cabin via the back door, taking a circuitous route through the woods to approach the main lodge from the blind side, away from the large windows of the meeting room. Years of photographing wildlife had taught me how to move silently, how to remain unseen while positioning for the perfect shot. Those skills served me well as I circled the massive structure, identifying the meeting room by the cluster of luxury vehicles parked nearby. The building's rustic design included numerous decorative elements that provided convenient handholds and concealment. I scaled a maintenance trellis to reach a narrow utility walkway that ran below the meeting room's windows, designed to allow staff access for cleaning and maintenance. Pressed against the wall beside a partially open window, I activated the directional microphone concealed in what appeared to be a telephoto lens, aiming it toward the voices inside. Through my earpiece, the conversation became clear. "Quarterly performance reviews first," Richard was saying, "then the spouse evaluations. Harold has prepared the updated integration assessments for discussion." "I've distributed the preliminary ratings," Harold's voice responded. "As you'll see, we have some concerning developments to address." Papers rustled. I imagined the family members reviewing documents containing clinical assessments of their spouses, of me. "Thomas, let's begin with your household," Richard continued. "Olivia's rating has improved to 6.8, reflecting her increased compliance with family protocols and successful management of the children's academic performance." "She's been working very hard to meet expectations," Thomas confirmed, his tone businesslike despite discussing his wife. "The mentoring sessions with Mother have been particularly effective in correcting her tendency toward emotional expression." "Indeed," Eleanor interjected. "Olivia has shown marked improvement in public composure and appropriate deference. I believe she's ready for limited inclusion in the investment committee discussions, though not voting privileges yet." "Agreed," Richard said. "Note that for the record, Harold. Olivia Wilson approved for Phase 3, Level 1 privileges." More paper shuffling. "Moving to Jennifer's household," Harold continued. "Kevin maintains his solid 7.9 rating with notable improvement in business contributions while maintaining appropriate subordination to senior family members." "He's fully integrated," Jennifer stated, pride evident in her voice. "Completely aligned with family objectives." "Excellent," Richard approved. "We'll proceed with his advancement to full voting rights at the next quarterly review." My stomach churned as I listened to them discussing human beings, their spouses, like corporate assets being evaluated for promotion or dismissal. But the worst was yet to come. Now for Daniel's household, Harold said, his tone shifting subtly. Rebecca's current rating is problematic. Silence fell over the room. I pressed the microphone closer, straining to hear. How problematic? Daniel asked, his voice tight. Her rating has fallen to 3.9, Harold replied. That's below the sustainability threshold, as you know. But she's been making efforts, Daniel protested. She's been more engaged with family activities, more receptive to guidance. Too little, too late, Thomas interjected. The pattern is clear, Daniel. She shows superficial compliance, then reverts to independence. The photography business takes precedence over family obligations. She maintains inappropriate friendships. She questions protocols. Recent behavior modifications appear strategic rather than genuine, Eleanor added, her clinical assessment of me chilling to hear. I suspect she's recognized her precarious position and is attempting to present artificial compliance. We've seen this pattern before, Richard stated gravely. The Bennett analysis suggests a 92% probability that she'll never successfully integrate into the family structure. What are you suggesting? Daniel's voice had taken on an edge I rarely heard. Rebecca is my wife, and your first responsibility is to this family, Richard countered firmly. We've been patient, Daniel. We've provided resources, guidance, multiple opportunities for adjustment. The data is conclusive. We're recommending implementation of Separation Protocol Alpha, Harold said quietly. Financial incentive package, career opportunity in the European division, clean dissolution of the marriage with appropriate non-disclosure provisions. My blood ran cold. They were discussing the termination of my marriage as dispassionately as a business divestiture. And if she doesn't accept? Daniel asked, his voice strained. A heavy pause followed. Then Protocol Beta would be required. Richard finally answered. Though we prefer to avoid such measures when possible. Protocol Beta, evidence creation. The method they used when spouses wouldn't leave quietly, when they needed to manufacture reasons for divorce that would preserve the family's reputation and control. I need time to think, Daniel said. This is unexpected. The assessment trends have been clear for over a year, Eleanor countered. Your attachment is clouding your judgment, dear. Remember, Christine, how difficult that became when you delayed the inevitable? Christine, Daniel's ex-girlfriend who had disappeared to Seattle, who had warned me to get out while I could. Had she been subjected to Protocol Beta when Protocol Alpha failed? We'll finalize the decision tomorrow. During the spouse evaluation session, Richard concluded. For now, let's move on to the quarterly business results. As the conversation shifted to financial matters, I carefully withdrew from my position, mind reeling with what I'd just heard. They had already decided my fate. Tomorrow's evaluation was merely a formality, a pretense of deliberation when the verdict had already been delivered. And Daniel. Daniel hadn't immediately agreed to their plan, but neither had he strongly objected. His hesitation told me nothing conclusive about whether he was a willing participant in this system, or another victim caught in its machinery. I made my way back to our cabin through the woods, moving on autopilot, my thoughts racing. I needed to adjust my plans. Whatever evidence I gathered tomorrow would be useful for exposing the Wilson family system, but it wouldn't save my marriage. That path had already been closed by a rating of 3. 9 on a scale I'd never consented to be judged by. The question now was not whether to leave, but how, and what to salvage from the wreckage. Back at the cabin, I transferred the audio recording to my secure drive, then sent a coded message to Megan. Weather forecast changing. May need rain check on Sunday plans. Our predetermined signal that the situation had escalated. She would be on higher alert now, ready to implement our contingency plans if necessary. I spent the next hour carefully considering my options. Confronting the entire family was too risky. They had resources, influence, and a system designed to eliminate threats. Confronting Daniel alone might be possible, but without knowing his true role in the system, I couldn't predict his reaction. My safest approach remained the original plan: document tomorrow's evaluation session, gather irrefutable evidence of their manipulation and control techniques, then execute a clean exit on my own terms, not theirs. The dinner for non-participating spouses was held in the lodge's smaller dining room, just Kevin and me, served by the attentive staff and making awkward small talk while our spouses discussed our futures in the nearby conference room. "So, looking forward to the hike tomorrow?" Kevin asked, cutting his steak with meticulous precision. "Absolutely," I lied smoothly. "Though I might bring my camera. The lake views are supposed to be spectacular from the ridge trail." Kevin's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "I don't think cameras are allowed on that excursion. Family policy." "Oh?" I maintained an innocent expression. "I don't recall Daniel mentioning that." "It's a distraction-free experience," he explained carefully. "Better to be fully present for the natural beauty." I nodded as if this made perfect sense, noting how uncomfortable Kevin became discussing anything adjacent to the family's secret systems. His perfect integration, his 7.9 rating, had been achieved through complete surrender of independent thought. "I'll leave the camera behind then," I assured him. "Wouldn't want to break any rules." After dinner, I returned to our empty cabin, the silence oppressive as I waited for Daniel to return from the meeting. I considered calling Megan, but decided against it. The Wilson retreat operated on its own cellular network, ostensibly for better coverage in this remote area, but more likely for monitoring communications. It was nearly midnight when Daniel finally returned, the scent of whiskey preceding him through the door. He looked exhausted, the weight of whatever had followed my eavesdropping session clearly bearing down on him. "Long meeting," I observed. From my position on the couch, a book open in my lap, though I hadn't read a word. "Budget projections," he said vaguely, loosening his tie. "You know how Dad gets about the numbers." Another lie in a marriage I was discovering had been built on them. I studied his face, searching for any sign of the man I thought I'd married, wondering if he had ever existed. "Everything okay?" I asked. "You seem tense." He poured himself another whiskey from the cabin's well-stocked bar. "Just tired. These retreats are always..." "Intense?" I suggested when he didn't finish his thought. "Yeah." He downed half his drink in one swallow. "Intense." I closed my book, setting it aside. "Daniel, are you happy with our marriage?" The question clearly startled him. He turned to face me fully, his expression guarded. "What kind of question is that?" "A simple one," I countered. "Are you happy with me, with our life together?" He set his glass down, approaching to sit beside me on the couch. "Of course I am. Why would you ask that?" I searched his face, looking for truth among the practiced responses. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm meeting expectations. If I'm the wife you hoped I'd be." His expression softened, and he took my hand. "Becca, you're everything I want." "But am I everything your family wants?" I pressed, pushing closer to dangerous territory but needing to gauge his reaction. A shadow crossed his face. "What my family thinks doesn't matter. This is about us." But it wasn't, and we both knew it. The Wilson family machinery controlled everything: our home location, our social circle, our career paths, our future plans. There was no us separate from the Wilson collective. "Just feeling insecure, I guess," I said, retreating to safer ground. "The Wilson family is so accomplished. Sometimes it's intimidating." "You have nothing to worry about," he assured me, squeezing my hand. The lie came easily to him, even as plans for my removal were being finalized one building away. That night, lying beside him in the darkness, I listened to his breathing even out into sleep while my mind raced through tomorrow's possibilities. By this time tomorrow, I would have the evidence I needed. I would know definitively whether Daniel was victim or perpetrator. I would have my escape plan in motion. For now, though, I was still trapped in the Wilson family web, playing my assigned role while they discussed my disposal like a problematic business asset. Morning arrived with picture-perfect weather for the scheduled hiking excursion. Clear skies, mild temperature, gentle breeze across the lake. I dressed in the outdoor attire expected for such an activity, concealing a small recording device in my sports watch and another in my hiking backpack. "Remember, the North Trail has the best views," Daniel said as he helped me adjust my backpack straps. "The guide will probably stick to the easier east path, but see if you can convince the group to take the detour. It's worth it." His concern for my hiking experience seemed bizarrely disconnected from reality, given what I now knew. Was this compartmentalization, his ability to simultaneously plan my removal from the family while ensuring I enjoyed my final Wilson retreat? Or was it guilt, manifesting as overcompensation? "I'll keep that in mind," I said, checking that my water bottle was securely attached to my pack. "What time will your meeting end?" "Hard to say. These evaluation sessions can run long." He kissed my forehead. "Have fun, though. Try to enjoy it." Try to enjoy being herded away from the real action, kept occupied with physical activity while my future was decided without my input. I forced a smile. "I'm sure it will be illuminating." We parted ways outside the main lodge, Daniel heading toward the boathouse where the evaluation session would take place, me joining Kevin and our assigned hiking guide near the trailhead. As I watched Daniel walk away, I wondered if this was the last normal moment we would share, if by dinner our marriage would be effectively over. The hiking guide, a local outdoorsman named Trevor who clearly had no idea of the Wilson family dynamics, enthusiastically outlined our planned route, pointing out highlights on a trail map. Kevin nodded along, playing his role of interested participant while occasionally checking his watch. "We should get started," he suggested after the third such glance. "Wouldn't want to fall behind schedule." Trevor led us onto the trail, chatting about local wildlife and geology with authentic passion. Under different circumstances, I might have enjoyed the excursion, might have been capturing the stunning vistas with my camera instead of mentally calculating how quickly I could separate from the group. My opportunity came about 40 minutes into the hike, as we approached a scenic overlook where Trevor suggested we take a water break. "Nature calls," I announced with appropriate embarrassment. "I'll just step into the woods for a moment." "Don't wander too far," Trevor cautioned. "It's easy to get turned around in these trees." I assured him I would be careful, then moved just far enough into the forest to be hidden from view while still able to navigate back to the trail. Once out of sight, I quickly changed direction, moving swiftly through the underbrush toward the lake. My research had revealed a maintenance path that ran along the water's edge, providing a direct route back to the lodge area without returning to the main trail. If Kevin and Trevor followed protocol, they would wait a reasonable time before searching for me, then alert the main lodge when they couldn't find me. I had perhaps a 20-minute head start. I moved as quickly as I could without leaving obvious signs of passage, grateful for the outdoor skills my father had taught me during childhood camping trips. The forest provided excellent cover, the thick undergrowth masking my footprints as I made my way toward the boathouse where the Wilson family was dismantling my life piece by piece. When the boathouse came into view through the trees, I slowed my pace, approaching with extreme caution. The structure was larger than a typical boathouse, designed to host small gatherings with its upper level configured as a meeting space overlooking the lake. I circled to the service entrance on the far side, where deliveries and maintenance access provided a less visible approach. As expected, the door was unlocked. Wilson Properties maintained the illusion of security while ensuring staff could move freely to maintain their comfort. Inside, I navigated past stored water equipment and maintenance supplies to reach the narrow staircase leading to the upper level. Voices drifted down, becoming clearer as I ascended, careful to avoid the steps that might creak. At the top of the stairs, a small service hallway ran behind the main meeting room, providing access to the small kitchen and restroom facilities. Perfect for my purposes, as it allowed me to position myself just outside the meeting room, hidden from view, but able to record everything. I activated both recording devices, then pressed myself against the wall beside the partially open door to the meeting room, where the Wilson family evaluation session was in full swing. Final assessment indicates continued pattern of resistance, Harold was saying, his voice formal and detached. Despite surface-level compliance in recent weeks, the underlying psychological profile remains incompatible with full integration. The recommendation stands, Richard declared. Separation Protocol Alpha, to be initiated immediately following the retreat. I still think we're being hasty, Daniel said, his voice strained. Rebecca has been making genuine efforts. The data doesn't support that conclusion, Eleanor countered firmly. Her recent behavioral modifications are tactical, not authentic. The pattern recognition software predicts a 96% probability of rebellion within 6 months, if we delay action. Pattern recognition software? They were using algorithms to analyze my behavior. We've prepared the necessary documents, Harold continued. A position with our Munich office, generous settlement package, and standard non-disclosure provisions. The dissolution can be managed quietly, with minimum disruption to family operations. And what about Becca? Daniel asked, an edge entering his voice. What about what she wants? What she wants is irrelevant, Thomas stated bluntly. She entered this family under our terms she agreed to. She never saw the real agreement, Daniel protested. You know that. None of them do before it's too late. My heart stuttered. Was Daniel acknowledging the forged signatures, the manipulated consent? Was he finally questioning the system? That's by design, Richard replied coldly. Initial testing showed that full disclosure resulted in a 98% rejection rate. The progressive integration model produces much higher compliance. You mean trapping people in a system they never agreed to? Daniel said, his voice rising slightly. Manipulating them until they're too invested to leave. A heavy silence followed this outburst. Finally, Eleanor spoke, her tone dangerously calm. Daniel, I understand you're emotionally attached to Rebecca. That's natural. But you're allowing sentiment to cloud your judgment. Remember your commitment to this family. I remember being told my wife would be evaluated fairly, he retorted. That if she made an honest effort, she'd be accepted. She was evaluated according to established metrics, Harold interjected. The same metrics applied to every spouse for 3 generations. Metrics designed to identify people who will surrender their identity to become Wilson automations, Daniel shot back. Maybe the metrics are the problem, not Becca. My pulse raced. Daniel was defending me, questioning the system. Had he been a reluctant participant all along? Or was this a new awakening? You're out of line. Richard's voice cut through the room like a whip. Your primary loyalty is to this family, to the legacy we've built. Individual relationships are secondary to that purpose. Always have been. Always will be. And if I disagree? Daniel challenged. If I choose my wife over your protocols? Another weighted silence. When Richard spoke again, his voice had dropped to a dangerous quiet. Then you would be making a grave mistake, one with significant consequences. Are you threatening me, Dad? Daniel asked incredulously. I'm reminding you of reality, Richard replied. You signed the same covenant we all did. Your position, your inheritance, Your entire professional identity exists within the Wilson framework. Walking away means walking away from everything, including access to your trust fund, Thomas added with what sounded like smug satisfaction. The terms are quite specific about family loyalty requirements. Financial coercion, another control mechanism I hadn't fully appreciated until now. So those are my choices? Daniel's voice had gone quiet. Sacrifice my wife to maintain my position or lose everything to keep her? That's unnecessarily dramatic. Eleanor sighed. No one is asking you to sacrifice Rebecca. We're simply transitioning her out of a role she's proven unsuitable for, with generous compensation and minimal disruption. She'll have a fresh start, a successful career, financial security. Many would consider it a kindness. A kindness, Daniel repeated hollowly. Manipulating her into a divorce she doesn't want or understand, making decisions about her life without her knowledge or consent. Some kindness. Enough, Richard declared. The decision has been made. Harold has prepared the documents. The Munich position has been arranged. After the retreat, you will present the opportunity to Rebecca, as we've discussed. Her belongings will be moved while you're both at work next. Tuesday. Clean, efficient, compassionate. My stomach churned at the clinical dismantling of my life, all arranged without my knowledge, presented as a fait accompli. And if she refuses? Daniel asked, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. Then we move to Protocol Beta, Harold answered matter-of-factly. Though I strongly advise against it, the documentation process is unpleasant for all involved. Evidence creation. Manufacturing reasons for divorce that would destroy my reputation, my career, possibly my future prospects. The Wilson family's scorched earth policy for spouses who wouldn't leave quietly. This is wrong, Daniel said, his voice barely audible. All of it. The assessments, the protocols, the manipulation. It's wrong. It's necessary, Richard countered firmly. It's how we've preserved this family's position for generations. How we've ensured only suitable additions to the bloodline. How we've protected our legacy from dilution and disruption. It's how you've controlled everyone and everything around you, Daniel corrected. How you've turned us all into extensions of your will rather than individual human beings. That's enough, Eleanor interjected sharply. You're upset, Daniel. Perhaps you should take some time to compose yourself before we continue. No, Daniel's voice had strengthened. I'm seeing clearly for the first time in years. This system, this family cult you've created, it's toxic. It destroyed my relationship with Christine. It's destroying my marriage to Becca. It's destroying me. Shuffling sounds suggested movement in the room. Richard spoke again, his voice cold with authority. You're dismissed, Daniel. Return to your cabin, collect yourself, and reconsider your position. When you're ready to approach this rationally, we'll resume the discussion. There's nothing more to discuss, Daniel responded, his voice moving toward the door where I was hidden. I won't do it. I won't be part of this anymore. Panic surged through me. I had seconds to move before Daniel exited directly into my hiding spot. I backed away rapidly, searching for concealment, but the narrow service hallway offered few options. The door to the meeting room flew open just as I pressed myself into the small alcove beside the restroom door. Daniel stormed out, his face flushed with anger, too absorbed in his own emotions to notice me partially hidden just feet away. He descended the stairs quickly, his footsteps heavy with fury. I remained frozen, hardly daring to breathe, as voices continued from the meeting room. That went as expected, Harold noted calmly. He'll calm down, Richard replied dismissively. They always do when they realize what they're giving up. If not, we have contingencies, Eleanor added. The psychological pressure points were mapped in his assessment last quarter. Thomas, be prepared to implement if necessary. Gladly, Thomas responded. Been waiting years to put little brother in his place. The conversation continued, but I had heard enough. I needed to find Daniel, to learn if his rebellion was genuine or simply another manipulation tactic. Carefully, silently, I made my way back down the service stairs and out the maintenance entrance, circling wide around the boathouse to avoid being spotted. I ran through the woods toward our cabin, mind racing with possibilities. If Daniel's outburst was genuine, we might have a chance, not to save our place in the Wilson hierarchy, but to escape it together, to rebuild our relationship free from their toxic influence. But if it was another layer of manipulation, a good cop performance designed to maintain my trust while they implemented their separation protocol, then I needed to accelerate my exit strategy immediately. Part 5. The Resolution and Transformation. The cabin door was ajar when I approached, Daniel's voice drifting from inside, tense, urgent, punctuated with frustration. I slowed my pace, moving silently across the wooden porch to listen before revealing my presence. "I don't care about the contingencies," he was saying, his tone sharp. "I'm done with this system. All of it." A pause. He was on the phone. "No, you don't understand. I've watched them break people for years, reshape them, control them, discard them when they don't comply. I was complicit. I let it happen to Christine. I almost let it happen to Becca." Another pause, longer this time. 24 hours, that's all I need. Yes, I have copies of everything. No, they don't know. I've been planning this for months. Yes, since her score first dropped. Below threshold. My breath caught. Daniel had been planning something related to my evaluation score for months? Was this evidence of deeper manipulation or preparation for rebellion? "The account is set up. Untraceable, just like you showed me." "No, Megan. I won't tell Becca yet. Not until I'm sure she's safe." Megan? My Megan? Daniel was talking to my best friend? The revelation hit me like physical blow, pieces clicking together in a pattern I hadn't anticipated. I pushed the door open, no longer concerned with stealth. Daniel spun toward me, phone still pressed to his ear, face draining of color. "She's here. I have to go." He ended the call, setting the phone down carefully as if it might explode. "Becca, you're supposed to be hiking." "And you're supposed to be at the evaluation session," I countered, closing the door behind me. "The one where your family decided to implement separation protocol alpha on me." His eyes widened. "How do you know about the protocols? The evaluation system? The way your family monitors, controls, and discards spouses who don't measure up to their standards?" I leaned against the door, blocking the exit. "I've known for weeks, Daniel. I found the assessment books in the attic. I've been investigating ever since." Daniel sank onto the couch, shock evident in every line of his body. "You know everything?" The forged integration covenant, the surveillance, the manipulated career opportunities, the systematic isolation from independent friends. I crossed my arms. "Everything except why you're talking to my best friend about untraceable accounts and keeping me safe." "It's not what you think," he began, then stopped himself, shaking his head. "Actually, it's exactly what you think. I've been planning an escape from my family for months." "With Megan's help?" "My Megan?" He nodded slowly. "She approached me after your last lunch together. Said if I was half the man you thought I was, I'd help you get away from my family before they destroyed you." The implication staggered me. While I'd been investigating the Wilsons, gathering evidence for either confrontation or escape, Megan had been working with Daniel behind my back. "You could have told me," I said, hurt and confusion warring with cautious hope. "All this time I've been trying to figure out if you were a victim or perpetrator in this system, and you never once indicated you saw anything wrong with it." I couldn't risk it. Daniel stood, moving toward me with urgent intensity. "The Surveillance is everywhere. Our house, our cars, our phones. My family has been monitoring me since I first showed signs of integration resistance with Christine. If they suspected I was planning to leave, they'd implement containment protocols immediately. Containment protocols? Another layer of the Wilson control system I hadn't uncovered. Financial lockdown, social isolation, psychological pressure through family members. He ran a hand through his hair, agitation evident in every movement. I've seen it happen to cousins who tried to break away. One ended up in a wellness facility for 6 months before returning completely compliant. The implications chilled me to the bone. Not just control and manipulation, but something approaching imprisonment. "What exactly have you been planning?" I asked, maintaining a careful distance, still unsure if I could trust this newly revealed version of my husband. A complete break. New identities, secure finances they can't trace or control, relocation to a place beyond their influence. He gestured to his phone. Megan connected me with people who could help. Security specialists, financial experts, who understand how to shield assets from family dynasties like mine. It sounded elaborate, paranoid even. But after what I'd witnessed in the boathouse, I couldn't dismiss his concerns. "You believe your family would actually come after us? For what? Leaving the Wilson empire?" "It's not about the money," Daniel said with quiet certainty. "It's about control. No one leaves the Wilson system, not with their reputation, career, or relationships intact. My family built their empire by containing threats and eliminating variables. Anyone with insider knowledge of how they operate is, by definition, a threat." The picture he painted aligned with everything I'd discovered, yet seemed almost fantastical in its scope. A family so obsessed with control that they would pursue and punish escaped members like some corporate cult. "Why now?" I asked. "You said you've been planning for months. What changed today?" "They've moved up the timeline," he explained, pacing the small cabin. "Your separation was scheduled for next quarter, but something accelerated the process. In the meeting, they revealed the Munich position is already arranged. Your replacement belongings are already in storage. They're planning to move everything while we're at work on Tuesday." My replacement belongings. The phrase hit me like a physical blow. What does that mean? "It means they've already duplicated your essential possessions. Clothes, personal items, professional equipment. You'd go to work Tuesday, come home to our house, and find all your things apparently packed and moved to a new apartment you never arranged. The psychological disorientation is by design, making you doubt your own memory, your own choices. The calculated cruelty of it stole my breath. This wasn't just controlling behavior. It was methodical psychological warfare designed to break resistance. "We need to leave," I said, decision crystallizing with sudden clarity. "Now. Today." Daniel nodded. I was coming to the same conclusion. "But we can't just run, not without protection. The documentation we need is at our house in Oak Ridge." My mind raced, formulating a plan that incorporated both my evidence and Daniel's escape preparations. "What exactly do you have?" "Financial. Records showing systematic control and manipulation. Recordings of family meetings discussing containment of relatives who tried to leave. Psychological assessments used to identify and exploit pressure points." He met my gaze directly. "Evidence of criminal activities disguised as family business. Criminal as in blackmail, corporate espionage, falsification of medical records to control problematic family members." He swallowed hard. "My family doesn't just cultivate power, they eliminate obstacles to maintaining it." The full picture was darker than I'd imagined, extending beyond controlling family dynamics into potentially criminal territory. "I have evidence, too," I admitted. "Recordings of today's meeting, photos of the legal documents in Harold's office, including the forged integration covenant with my signature. Documentation of your family's spouse rating system and separation protocols. Daniel stared at me with something like awe. You've been investigating them all this time? Alone? Not entirely alone. Megan's been helping me, too. I allowed myself a small, ironic smile. Apparently, she's been quite busy. A tentative understanding passed between us. Two people who had been working toward the same goal from different directions, neither fully trusting the other enough to share the journey. We need to leave now, Daniel said, checking his watch. They'll be looking for me to reconsider my position soon, and when I don't return, they'll implement the contingency plan. Which is essentially house arrest disguised as a family intervention for my concerning behavior, he said grimly. Once that starts, we won't get another chance. I made a quick decision. We can't go to our house. It would be the first place they'd look. But Megan has copies of my evidence, and apparently she's been working with you on the escape plan. We go to her first, collect everything, then disappear. Daniel nodded, already moving to collect his essential items from around the cabin. I did the same, maintaining a cautious distance, still processing this new reality where my husband was neither villain nor victim, but something more complicated, a reluctant participant who had finally found the courage to break free. What? About the cameras? I asked, gesturing toward the bathroom where I'd discovered surveillance equipment. Already handled, he replied, showing me a small electronic device. Signal jammer. They've been seeing a looped feed of an empty cabin for the past 20 minutes. Professional-grade counter-surveillance equipment. Another sign that Daniel's rebellion had been carefully planned rather than impulsively decided. Car keys? I prompted, gathering only absolute essentials into my day pack. We can't take our car. GPS tracking. He pulled out a burner phone I hadn't seen before. I'm arranging alternative transportation now. Within 15 minutes, we had gathered our essentials and eliminated all electronic devices that could be tracked. Daniel led me out the back door of the cabin, through a service path that avoided the main areas of the retreat. Where exactly are we going? I whispered as we moved through the dense underbrush, circling wide around the Wilson property. Marina on the other side of the lake, he replied, keeping his voice low. There's a boat waiting. The escape felt surreal, slipping away from a family retreat through the woods like fugitives. Yet the evidence we'd both gathered, the conversations we'd recorded, suggested this level of caution was warranted. We emerged from the forest nearly a mile from the Wilson property, at a small public marina where weekend boaters launched their vessels. A middle-aged man in fishing gear nodded almost imperceptibly as we approached, then turned back to his tackle box without acknowledging us further. Daniel guided me to a modest fishing boat at the end of the dock. Get in, he murmured. Stay low until we're across. The man with the tackle box casually drifted toward a truck in the parking lot, leaving his fishing gear behind, gear that, I realized, he'd never actually used. Another part of Daniel's network, facilitating our escape without direct contact. As Daniel guided the boat across the lake, I finally asked the question that had been burning in my mind. When did you start seeing your family clearly? When did you decide to fight back? He kept his eyes on the water, hands steady on the controls. It wasn't one moment, more like a series of revelations I couldn't ignore anymore. He glanced at me briefly. Watching what happened to Christine was the start. Seeing how they systematically isolated and then discarded her once she began questioning the family dynamics. You never told me the real story there. I wasn't allowed to, he said simply. Part of the separation protocol includes a complete narrative restructuring. I was given the story about her job opportunity in Chicago and required to maintain it. But you knew it was a lie. He nodded, guilt etching lines around his eyes. I told myself it was necessary, that she hadn't been right for the family, that she'd be happier elsewhere. The usual justifications. But then I saw her in Seattle 2 years ago during a business trip. She was diminished somehow, afraid. She wouldn't even speak to me. The boat cut smoothly through the water, putting distance between us and the Wilson retreat with each passing minute. And with me? I asked, needing to understand. Were you evaluating me all along? He was quiet for a long moment. At first, yes. It's what we were trained to do: observe, report, participate in the system. But something changed after our first year of marriage. What? You remained stubbornly yourself, he said with a small smile. Despite all the pressure, the subtle manipulation, my mother's guidance, you bent but never broke, never surrendered. The core of who you are. And that made you question the system? It made me question everything, he admitted. The family's definition of a suitable spouse, the metrics they use to evaluate people. Eventually, their right to control any of it. We reached the opposite shore where another nondescript vehicle waited in the small parking area. A mid-range sedan with rental plates, nothing that would attract attention. Megan arranged this? I asked as we transferred quickly from boat to car. Part of the network she connected me with, Daniel confirmed, sliding behind the wheel. Former victims of family control systems similar to the Wilsons. They help people escape these situations. As we pulled onto the highway heading away from Lake Willowbrook, I checked the burner phone Daniel had given me. We should let Megan know we're coming. Use the code phrase we established, he instructed. Weather clearing, heading to shelter. I sent the message, still adjusting to this new reality where my husband and best friend had created an entire secret communication system behind my back. For my protection, they'd claim, but the exclusion still stung. They'll discover we're gone within the hour, Daniel said, checking the rearview mirror compulsively. Maybe sooner if the signal jammer fails or Kevin reports back about the hiking trip. What will they do? Damage control first, creating a cover story for the family and business associates about our mental health retreat or extended working vacation. Then they'll deploy resources to find us. You really believe they'll come after us? For simply leaving? Daniel's expression was grim. We're not just leaving, Becca. We're taking evidence that could destroy the Wilson family's reputation, business connections, and carefully constructed public image. My father would burn down half the state before allowing that kind of threat to exist. The drive to Megan's apartment took 90 minutes. 90 minutes of tense silence punctuated by Daniel's security checks and my own tumultuous thoughts. My world had inverted in less than 24 hours. My husband, whom I'd suspected of being a willing participant in his family's control system, had actually been planning our escape. My investigation, which I'd conducted in secret fear, had been paralleled by his own rebellion. And through it all, Megan had been the silent orchestrator, connecting pieces neither of us fully saw. She was waiting at her apartment door when we arrived, ushering us quickly inside before anyone could notice. You made it, she said, relief evident as she secured multiple locks behind us. Any signs of pursuit? Not yet, Daniel replied, moving immediately to the windows to check the street. But they'll have identified our absence by now. Megan turned to me, her expression a mix of apology and determination. I know you have questions, a lot of them, but we need to move quickly. You've been working with Daniel behind my back, I stated, unable to keep the hurt from my voice, all while helping me investigate his family. I was helping both of you find the truth, she countered. When you started telling me about the Wilson family's controlling behaviors, I recognized the pattern from cases I'd encountered in my previous work. Previous work? This was new information. Before I moved to Oak Ridge, I worked with an organization that helps people escape family cults and control systems, she explained. When your description of the Wilsons started raising red flags, I began monitoring the situation more closely. And approached me separately, Daniel added, to determine whether I was victim or perpetrator. I couldn't tell you, Becca, Megan said, her eyes pleading for understanding. If Daniel was fully integrated into the Wilson system, revealing, my background could have endangered both of us. And if he was trying to break free, telling you prematurely could have exposed his efforts through the surveillance systems. The explanation was logical, even professional. But emotions don't always respond to logic. I thought I was protecting you by keeping you at arm's length from my investigation, I said. All while you were running your own operation. Not my operation, Megan corrected. Just connecting you both with resources you needed. And now we need to use those resources to get you both to safety. She led us to her home office, where a secure laptop displayed what appeared to be transportation schedules. Everything's arranged. New identification documents, secure financial accounts, relocation package. You'll leave tonight. Leave? To where? I asked, the reality of our situation finally sinking in. We weren't just escaping a controlling family. We were entering a kind of witness protection program. The less you know until you're on your way, the better, Megan replied. But it's somewhere the Wilson influence doesn't reach. Daniel nodded, apparently already familiar with these arrangements. What about the evidence? The documentation we've both collected? Secured and duplicated, Megan assured him. Copies have been encrypted and distributed to secure locations with deadman switches. If anything happens to either of you, the information goes public immediately. The professionalism of the operation was both reassuring and disturbing. This was clearly not Megan's first extraction from a controlling family system. I need time to process this, I said, feeling overwhelmed. 24 hours ago, I was investigating my husband's family. Now I'm running away with him, guided by my best friend who turns out to be some kind of cult extraction specialist. I know it's a lot, Megan acknowledged, but we don't have the luxury of time for a gentle transition. The Wilsons have resources. Most controlling families don't. Private security, law enforcement connections, financial leverage over half the state. As if to underscore her point, Daniel's burner phone vibrated with an incoming message. His expression darkened as he read it. What is it? I asked. My security contact at the retreat, he replied. Thomas has activated the concerned family protocol. There are already wellness checks being called in to local police departments around Oak Ridge, reporting us as potentially suicidal and dangerous to ourselves. The first stage of containment, Megan explained grimly. Creating a paper trail that justifies forcible intervention for your own safety. And the implications chilled me. They'd have us committed? Only if necessary, Daniel said. Usually the threat is enough to bring people back into compliance. The actual commitment is reserved for those who resist repeatedly. The depth of the Wilson family's control mechanisms continued to shock me, even after everything I'd discovered. This wasn't just manipulation. It was systemic abuse disguised as familial concern. We need to finalize the evidence package, Megan said. Moving to her computer. Combine what you both have collected, create the leverage you'll need if they continue pursuit. For the next hour, we worked methodically, downloading my recordings from the boathouse meeting, adding them to Daniel's collected documentation, organizing everything into a comprehensive case file that revealed the full extent of the Wilson family's control system. The evidence was damning when assembled. Psychological assessments used to identify vulnerabilities, financial manipulation to ensure dependence, surveillance records documenting private conversations, medical files altered to support interventions for non-compliant family members, and the spouse evaluation system with its clinical separation protocols. This would destroy them if released, Daniel said, staring at the compiled documentation, with a mixture of horror and vindication. Not just reputation damage. There's enough here for criminal charges against my father, Harold, possibly others. Which is why they'll do anything to prevent its release, Megan reminded us. Your safety depends on maintaining this leverage without having to use it. A delicate balance, threatening enough exposure to keep the Wilsons at bay, while avoiding pushing them to desperate measures. As evening approached, Megan's phone chimed with an alert. "Your transportation is ready. We need to move." She handed us each a folder containing new identification documents, financial information, and contact protocols. "Memorize, then destroy," she instructed. "Everything you absolutely need is also backed up digitally in secure locations you can access with the passwords provided." Reality hit me with stunning clarity. We were leaving everything behind. My photography business, our home, our entire established lives in Oak Ridge. "What about your safety?" I asked Megan suddenly. "Once we're gone, they'll know you helped us." "I've arranged my own exit strategy," she assured me. "By this time tomorrow, Megan Chen will have accepted a job opportunity overseas. A different identity, a different life." Another revelation. My best friend had always been prepared for this possibility, had structured her life in Oak Ridge to be easily abandoned if necessary. "I don't know how to thank you," I said, emotion finally breaking through my shock. "Live free," she replied simply. "Build a life based on genuine choice, not manipulation. That's all the thanks I need." We left Megan's apartment through the service entrance, transferring quickly to an unmarked van that would take us to the next stage of our journey. As we pulled away, I watched her building recede in the distance, another chapter of my life closing with startling finality. "Are we doing the right thing?" I asked Daniel softly, doubt creeping in as the magnitude of our decision became clear. "Running away? Starting over completely?" He took my hand, his grip firm and certain. "We're not running away, Becca. We're running toward something, toward the chance to build a life that's actually ours. One where we make choices based on our own values, not algorithms and assessment scores. What if they find us?" "They won't," he said with quiet confidence. "Not if we're careful, not if we maintain the leverage of everything we've documented. My family operates through control and fear. Without those tools, they have no power over us." As the van carried us toward whatever future awaited, I realized that the question of whether Daniel had been victim or perpetrator in the Wilson family system had never had a simple answer. Like most people raised in controlling environments, he had been both, shaped by the very system he eventually rebelled against, and I had never been just a wife being evaluated and found wanting. I had been a threat to their system simply by maintaining my independence, by questioning what I was supposed to accept without thought. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of our apartment overlooking a city far from Oak Ridge, watching the sunset paint the unfamiliar skyline in shades of gold and crimson. Inside, Daniel was preparing dinner, humming softly to himself. A habit he'd developed only after we'd escaped the constant surveillance and judgment of his family. My phone chimed with a notification, a message through our secure communication system that connected us to Megan and the network of survivors and helpers she'd introduced us to. "Package delivered," the message read. "Receipt confirmed." I smiled, knowing what it meant. The final compilation of evidence against the Wilson family had been delivered to their attorney with clear terms. Leave us alone permanently, or the documentation goes public. Not a threat, just a boundary with consequences. Daniel joined me on the balcony, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "Good news?" he asked, noticing my expression. "The best," I confirmed. "I think we're finally free." "We've been free since the moment we left," he murmured against my hair. "This just makes it official." In the month since our escape, we'd built a new life piece by piece. New jobs, new home, new social connections. But most importantly, we'd built a new relationship with each other, one based on honesty and genuine choice rather than performance and evaluation. There were still difficult moments, times when Daniel unconsciously fell into Wilson family patterns, when the hypervigilance of our escape resurfaced in anxiety dreams or startled reactions to ordinary situations. Freedom from a lifetime of conditioning didn't happen overnight, but each day brought us further from the Wilson family's influence, closer to the people we were meant to be when not constrained by secret rating systems and manipulative protocols. "What are you thinking about?" Daniel asked, following my gaze toward the sunset. "How strange it is that we had to lose everything to gain ourselves," I replied. "How sometimes winning feels exactly like losing until you create a new definition of victory." He turned me to face him, his eyes clear and present in a way they rarely had been in our old life. "Do you regret it? Leaving everything behind?" I considered the question seriously, weighing what we'd lost against what we'd gained. The photography business I'd built, the friends and connections left behind, the stability of our previous life. "No," I said finally, with absolute certainty. "I don't regret trading a beautiful cage for freedom, no matter how uncomfortable freedom sometimes feels." Daniel smiled, relief evident in the softening of his features. "I wake up every morning, amazed that you chose me when you could have walked away alone, started fresh without the baggage I bring." "We escaped together," I reminded him. "Partners in crime, remember?" "Partners in everything," he corrected, kissing me softly. Inside, our simple dinner waited on the table, nothing like the elaborate meals served at Wilson family functions, with their hidden hierarchies and performance expectations. Just honest food, honest conversation, honest connection. As we settled into our evening routine, I reflected on the strange journey that had led us here. A secret rating system, discovered by accident. An investigation conducted in fear and determination. A husband who turned out to be both more and less complicit than I had imagined. A best friend with a secret past and the skills to help us escape. The Wilson family had spent generations building a system to control every aspect of their members' lives, to ensure perfect compliance and continuation of their legacy. They had evaluated and measured and manipulated, treating people like assets, to be managed rather than individuals to be respected. But in the end, all their protocols and assessments had failed to account for the most fundamental human quality, the desire for authentic freedom, the need to live by genuine choice rather than coercion. We had rated unsatisfactory in their system, but in escaping it, we had found something infinitely more valuable than their approval could ever be. We had found ourselves. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.